Hello, and welcome back to the Classical Training Ground, where we are now exploring the early chapters of Genesis. Last time we talked about Genesis, we talked about the framework of God's creation. We discussed the three realms of heaven, water, and dry land, filled by lights, fish and birds, animals, and humanity. Now let's briefly turn our attention to the seventh day in Genesis 2 1 through 3. God has finished all his work of creation, and now he enters into his rest. Notice that unlike the first 6 days, day 7 never finishes with there is evening and there is morning. As far as Genesis is concerned, day 7 has never ended. Starting with Adam, God invites his people into that rest, as we see in passages like Psalm 95. Completing the God given task will complete day 7. And now the main focus of this video will be the nature and reward of Adam's God given task. So, what was the nature of that task? We need to start with Adam's role as God's image bearer. God says in Genesis 1:26, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." In the context where Genesis was written, kings view themselves as image bearers of their gods, and kings themselves would plant statues of themselves across their domains. This would establish the king's royal authority over his domain. One such figure would be this statue here of Ashurbanipal, king of Assyria. Similarly, man as God's image bearer signifies God's royal authority. This naturally leads to the purpose of making man with dominion over the animals of creation. Now view the parallel between Genesis 1:26 and 1:27 through 28. God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful, and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." First, man must reproduce and populate the earth. This is where the woman comes in as the helper fit for him, as Genesis 2:18 says. With the woman, Adam can begin to multiply, and from there he fills the earth. Finally, as God's image bearer, he is to subdue the world to God's rule. We see Adam begin to exercise his royal authority when he names the animals. Notice back in chapter 1, when God names day and night, sea and sky. God is exercising his royal authority over those things. However, he leaves the animals unnamed for Adam to name. As image bearer, Adam stamps God's divine authority over the animals when he names them. This gives Adam a royal task. Genesis 2 also shows us that Adam is to work as the first priest, with Eden as the first temple. One example is in verse 15, where God places Adam in the garden, quote, "to work it and to guard it." When you see that language of working and guarding elsewhere in the Bible, it describes the priestly duties in the sanctuary. Numbers 3:7, for example, uses that same language to describe priestly duties in the tabernacle. Like the priests, Adam has to serve and worship God in the garden as a divine sanctuary, and yet he must also guard it from anything unclean. Now, we shouldn't think that this connection between Eden and the temple was lost on ancient Jewish readers. Jubilees 3:12 through 14 says, for example, "And when she finished those 80 days, she being Eve, we brought her into the Garden of Eden because it is more holy than any land. And every tree which is planted in it is holy. Therefore, the ordinances of these days were ordained for anyone who bears a male or female, that she might not touch anything holy, and she might not enter the sanctuary until these days are completed for a male or female. This is the law and testimony which is written for Israel, so that they might keep it always." Now, returning to Genesis itself, we can see that within the sanctuary there are two special trees, namely the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We can know that the entire time Adam was in the garden, he never ate from the tree of life, As, spoiler alert, Adam is kicked out, God gives the reason, lest he also stretch his hand and take from the tree of life and live forever. That is Genesis 3:22. Since Adam has already eaten from the one tree, the concern is over Adam additionally eating from the other tree, implying that he hasn't yet. Had Adam won the right to eat from that tree, he would have won the right to eternal life. At the same time, the only tree that God had told Adam not to eat from was the other tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, as we see here in Genesis 2:16 through 17. You may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for on the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Now, this tree does not indicate that knowing good and evil is bad in itself. This kind of language refers to exercising judgment. For example, King Solomon asks for wisdom in 1 Kings 3:9, that I may discern between good and evil. With that in mind, what does the tree of the knowledge of good and evil signify about judgment? In this context, it signifies autonomy, which is antithetical to reflecting God's rule as image bearer. To seek autonomy means to seek your own rule instead of God's. We have seen Adam's tasks. Now we must see what Adam would get if he succeeded or failed. To see Adam's reward, let's revisit that point that only the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was prohibited from Adam. First, we see at the very least that Adam will not die so long as he doesn't sin. More importantly, we see that the tree of life, despite Adam not having eaten from it, is still available to him potentially. Should Adam finish his task without sinning, he would win the right to eat from it for himself and his offspring. He would complete that seventh day of creation and join God in that eternal rest. Had Adam failed to do so as commanded, God tells him in Genesis 2:17 again that he shall surely die. The consequences, therefore, are eternal life versus eternal death. Our next video in this series, we will explore whether or not Adam succeeded or failed, as well as the consequences of his performance. See you next time on the Classical Training Ground. Please like and subscribe. If you'd like to become a student with the Classical Training Ground, click the link below in the description and enter the details.